Is Venezuela becoming a tax cow? Well, today we discuss.
Welcome to Venezuela Insider, the only place in Venezuela for expats, digital nomads, entrepreneurs, investors, travelers, and related internationals. For more information, venezuelainsider.com.
One of the funny issues regarding Venezuela is taxes. And you think Venezuela has this autocratic regime, and you might think that taxes are a big deal in the country. That historically hasn't been the case. Unlike most nations all over the world, especially in Latin America, where the central government gets the revenue throughout taxes and high tax burden. Like, for instance, in Argentina, is the case that you drink a can of Coca-Cola and half of what you pay is taxes. Well, Venezuela is not the case because most of the revenue that the government has is throughout oil revenue, oil exporting revenue, rather than taxes. That doesn't mean that Venezuela doesn't have taxes, not the case whatsoever. However, the Venezuelan government and tax authorities historically is that plays a second fiddle in the country. And actually, the people, unlike many people in all over the world, where they complain that they pay high taxes and they don't get what they pay for, regarding, of course, the tax bill, in Venezuela is quite the opposite. The mindset of the, let's say, average and less educated Venezuelan is that the government should give them money or some benefits and so on because of the oil revenue. However, this mindset and this trajectory might change on the next few years, and you might say it's changing. Right now, the Venezuelan government is applying some economic policies regarding incentivizing new businesses and the remaining businesses and so on, because they want to increase the tax revenue. And just recently, just a few weeks ago, the President Maduro mentions that he wants to increase the tax revenue from $5 billion, that's roughly the number, of this is just the taxes from the central government, not including the regional taxes, from $5 billion to $10 billion. Now, you might say whatever you want to say. However, I don't think it's going to be the case. You might reach 6, 7, maybe $8 billion on tax revenue, but you're not going to reach 10 billion on 2024. Now, the history regarding this government with the local businessmen has been, very fast, very feisty, very, harsh, with a lot of frictions. At some moment, we had some socialist policies, and for a few years, we had real communist policies. Right now, we have some crony capitalistic policies that are different. But at the moment, the central government like to attack a lot the private sector with measures like putting price controls. They did not allow price gouging when we had the hyperinflation. Right now, we don't have hyperinflation in Venezuela. I have to remember that yet again. And also, it doesn't matter because the country is de facto dollarized. However, the tax revenue, the tax bill, you have to pay it on the local currency, the Venezuelan bolivar. Very good. Now, what happens right now is that since 2018, the government eliminated the price controls of any given goods and service, and also eliminated the currency exchanges, caps, and controls that we had. Now the Venezuelan bolivar fluctuates freely on the open market, so you have a fair exchange of currencies right now in the country. In case, for instance, a multinational that has to repatriate their earnings within the country on hard currency for their main base in US and Europe or Asia and so on. Income tax is not as important here in the country. The payroll tax, not as great. There are contributions that you have to pay. The employer has to pay for their employees, but it's not a big deal. Salaries are not high in the country, so it's irrelevant at this moment, but still have to be paid. Just, running the errand and the due diligence and so on in order to cover the tax bill. However, if you have a small, mid-sized business, a brick and mortar business, and here comes the big difference between, let's say, a brick and mortar business, physically, traditionally here in the country, like a hardware store or a restaurant or a supermarket, something like that. Of course, you're going to have to pay full taxes for that. If you have an offshore business, internet business, something remotely, something of that nature, still declare it. There are exemptions and like in any given tax code all over the world, but still, it's very good to just make your tax statement and pay something. I mean, with good accounting, you can pay something without breaking the bank. It's not going to be an important expense on your cost structure regarding an offshore tax business. So the main takeaway here, what I want to address on this particular video, is that the Venezuelan government has this view, especially for Westerns, that is communist, socialist, something of that nature. I will say in practice, they say they are socialists, by the way, but just like the Chinese government says they are communists, and believe me, right now, like Jim Rogers said, California is more communist than China at this moment. Well, something like that happens in Venezuela. The Venezuelan government is basically a crony capitalistic society right now. And instead of attacking the private sector, right now they just want their fair share of their tax bill, and that changed the status quo regarding doing business in Venezuela compared to 7 years ago. Now, what the Venezuelan government is looking for, instead of attacking the private sector like they did last decade, now they want to play ball. Okay, do your own thing, very fine, but you have to pay the tax bill. And that's for the central government. Now you have regional governments here, and those are the tricky ones. Those are the ones that can be a deal breaker. Here you have to manage it very well. They want their tax bill as well. It's draconian. You have to, start on to deal with these particular regional governments. But still, that can be managed. That can be negotiated compared to other, OECD countries that have way higher tax burdens that you cannot negotiate with these people. They have the monopoly of violence over there. Meanwhile, here in Venezuela, you can negotiate those things. Not necessarily the rate of your tax bill, but explain, hey, come on, dude, I'm just a small business owner, operator that wants to make a couple of bucks, pay the bills and so on. And you can negotiate with these people. And actually, on this particular case, I would say Venezuela is better than most of the Western OECD nations. You can take care of your tax bill and pay something, pay your fair share, and be on your own way. So here's the funny thing. So the main takeaway is that right now the government is more, is losing, it's not as draconian as it used to be 7 and 8 years ago. They were very harsh with private businesses, trust me. But right now they want their fair share. They are willing to, live and let live. And this particular case, live and let live and pay, put it some sort of way. And that right now is the status quo regarding private business in Venezuela. You can operate, you can do, legally, do whatever you want, but pay your tax bill on time according to the Venezuelan legislation.
Thank you for watching Venezuela Insider. Please like, share, and subscribe. Follow us on social media. If you want to work with us, VenezuelaInsider.com. Thanks again, and have a nice day.